Hello, I'm Kads, and welcome to today's video. So today we're going to be talking about my fusion plan for getting Thor Faehammer. Now, unfortunately, this is one day late, but as you might be able to tell, we're a little bit under the weather. No worries, it's just a common cold, but nonetheless, wanted to wait a day until I felt a little bit better before making this video. So without further ado, let's dive right into Thor's kit. Of course, he is one of the featured champions of the Asgard Divide event going on in the game, and he is the fusible one of the quartet. On the A1, Wrath of Mjolnir attacks one enemy 2 times, has a 20% chance of repeating the attack. This is similar to like a Georgian or a Fushan, so it has potential to do significant amounts of damage, and it also decreases target's turn meter by 10% for each hit, and that is accounting for all of the potential repeated attacks. On the A2, we have Fulminous Ricochet, which is another AoE attack or pseudo AoE attack. The way it works is it actually attacks every target in a random order, so technically it's all single target hits, which means it will bypass a lot of AoE damage reduction passives like Duchess, for example, or the heads of the Hydra clan boss. And then more importantly, each subsequent hit increases the damage inflicted by 25% up to 100%, so double the damage. So if there's 5 enemies, essentially the last 2 will be hit by double damage, which is a pretty substantial thing if you want to think about it. And then against enemy mobs, it will ignore block damage and unkillable blocks, but of course this part will not work against bosses. From what I've seen from other content creators on the test server, this ability here is super powerful in waves and against the Hydra clan boss. On the A3, we have Hammer of Heavens, an AoE attack again, and it places increased attack and increased crit damage on him for 2 turns before attacking. When booked, it has a 100% chance of permanently decreasing the resistance of each enemy, stacking up to 50%, 10% per instance. And so I believe this does not require any accuracy to do, so that's kind of nice. Over the course of a longer battle, you just have you're more likely to land your debuffs once you reduce the resistance by half. And then on top of that, he also brings AoE decreased speed. Now, if all of that's not interesting enough, the passive is also pretty decent. So he has Sky Rupture, which is every time the champion deals damage, not attacks, deals damage. So if you hit multiple enemies, that counts as multiple instances of damage. It will increase his thunder counter by 1, stacks up to 10, and for each stack he gains 3% crit damage, stacking up to, of course, 30%. And then once the thunder counter reaches 10, it will attack all enemies, so another AoE attack just from the passive, and it will place a stun debuff for 1 turn. And then lastly, the aura is attack in all battles by 30%. So overall, honestly, I'm not going to venture to give him an S tier, because I haven't seen the multipliers yet, but obviously he does a significant amount of damage in the right contexts. But I would definitely say at the bare minimum, he's like an A+ type nuker. Maybe not for PvP, but most certainly for PvE. In terms of the base stats, he has a pretty healthy amount of HP, almost 1600. Very healthy attack, 1600. The highest in the game, well, now in the game is like 1900, but prior to that for legendaries it was about 1700. So he's in the realm of like reasonably high. Defense is on the lower side, but he's an attack-based nuker, so it's to be expected. And his speed is very fast at 105. So I know a lot of people are talking about his potential relative to Hydra clan boss and or like a Spider hard mode, for example. But the thing that came to my mind first was actually the Cursed City of Centranos, because he is attack-based and he has a hard form of CC. That most notably does not require any books at all. All you have to do is deal 10 instances of damage, which in the case of wave content would be 2 AoEs, so his A3 and his A2, and then you'd have a chance to place an AoE stun just from taking 2 turns. So that is substantially powerful, and some of the hardest stages in Centranos are the ones where you have to use attack-based champions, and if you don't have any form of hard CC, you're basically dead in the water. There's not much you can do. So having an attack-based champion in your roster who does a significant amount of damage specifically against wave content, but also has CC in the kit that does not require any books at all whatsoever, is very, very useful. So before we get to the fusion spreadsheet, I do want to quickly mention that this is a hybrid style fusion, meaning that you have to collect all the fragments for the epic, which in this case is Diana Gloompiercer, and then you you level those up, ascend them, and then you can fuse that into the legendary. This is typically the hardest form of a fusion because you basically have to do almost everything in order to get all of the fragments, unless you happen to pull the Void Epic, which is very unlikely. And considering the events of the fusion, you probably aren't going to be pulling Void Shards at all, so you're very, very unlikely to pull her. So you really have to focus on whichever events you're going to be doing. Now let's take a look at this fusion in terms of the fusion plan spreadsheet, which will of course be linked in the description box down below if you want to check it out for yourself. For the most part, it is a pretty standard fusion layout. We have the 4 dungeon split, couple of classic arena tournaments, champion training tournament, champion chase, 3 dungeon divers, 3 artifact enhancement, champion training event, and then 1 summon rush. However, there is a bonus summon rush that we do not yet know the milestones for, and it only lasts for 2 days, and it is during like the next siege, so in a couple weeks time, and that does allow you to get an extra 50 fragments. So depending on your strategy, that one might be more or less enticing. Aside from the bonus summon rush, the only notable thing I've found is that you have the standard overlaps between champion training and dungeon events, so the pinch points as I like to call them. So champion training over here overlaps with Fire Knight as well as Ice Golem, and then the champion training event going on right now overlaps with Spider and a little bit of Dragon. On the right hand side here, for those who aren't familiar with the spreadsheet, we do have the milestones for every single event in the game. Anything marked with an asterisk is a predicted amount based on historical precedent, but I do make sure to go back and fill these in with the actual values after the events go live. Where possible, I do also share the resources that I use for any particular event and or tournament, including a sneak preview of my plan for the champion chase, and for example, how much silver I spent on the first artifact enhancement event. There's also the energy plan down here, which is basically my energy plan. It's not a guide or a layout for you guys, but that's just how I plan to spend my energy on each given day of the fusion. And then for hybrid style or traditional fusions, in a separate tab here, we do have the fusion potion calculator, which does highlight how many potions you're going to need to ascend all the champions for any particular fusion. And so you can see here, just for the 4 void epics, you're going to need 24 superior voids and then 12 arcanes, which is honestly probably the easiest form because most people in the game, majority of us, don't have a ton of void champions, and so you most likely have a ton of superior potions ready to go. But if you do happen to not be in that camp yet, then the fusion plan tab also has the days in which the potion keeps are all open. So the void keep specifically is open every Sunday, so be very careful about making sure that you do have enough of the potions, because you can only get them a couple times during the time scale of the fusion. So now let's have a quick scroll through some of the ongoing events in the game and talk about a little bit of my strategy when it comes to fusions. The first thing I do want to mention is that I will not be doing my standard supply count delta summary for this fusion, mainly because, like I said, this video is a little bit late, but more importantly, I've already completed the artifact enhancement, and I know how much I spent in terms of silver cost. I spent about 26 million to get to the 4775, and then a little bit extra to get out to the dust. But I don't remember where I started with the silver account, and I've also earned some from champion training and Spider, so I have no idea where my actual silver count was at the start. Kind of similar logic there for the gems. I don't really know exactly where I started, so it's just not going to be an accurate representation. So we're going to skip it for this particular iteration. But I think by now, those of you who've been paying attention to those posts can kind of get the gist of it, that it's not that intensive in terms of resources to complete a fusion, provided you have some stores or stockpiles. So we also have a Dungeon Divers event that just started this morning, and it's a 3700, which is pretty standard nowadays for a 3-day event. So I purposely did hold off on starting the Spider tournament until today, just to make sure we're maximizing the amount of points we can get in the Dungeon Divers. For the champion training event, which is 4 days long, I'm breaking it down basically into roughly 3,000-ish points per day over the course of the 4 days, and I am going out here for the Legendary Tome. But honestly, if you don't have the resources to do that, then getting to 6,100 is very, very cheap, and over the course of 4 days, you only need 1,500-ish points, so it's very, very doable. But for me, in my case, I'm going all the way out there, on top of everything else going on in the fusion. As per usual, I might say, I typically always chase Legendary Tomes that are accessible. We have a Classic Arena tournament starting tomorrow. Tag Arena tournament's not part of the fusion, of course. Spider tournament, we already kind of mentioned, but I haven't made that much progress because I basically started it today, this morning. But of course, my plan for this is to finish it over the next couple of days. And then the most interesting thing to talk about, in my opinion, relative to this fusion is actually the Champion Chase tournament. And we have the probably lowest ever Champion Chase amount I've ever seen in a fusion. So only 1,500 points just to get the fragments. And there's no gimmicks, no gotchas, no anything else going on here. Obviously, you could, continue onward if you're pursuing like the 10x for Freya. But honestly, if you have the resources in order to pull Sacreds during a 10x for Freya, then you probably, might be a stretch to say, but you probably have enough Sacreds to do the guaranteed event, so you're better off just doing that rather than gambling, just like we talked about for the summon pool. I was honestly expecting something closer to the 2,500 or the 3,000 mark just because of the caliber of Thor, but they've been generous on this one, so 1,500 points is all you're going to need, and for me, this is most certainly doable without having to pull any shards at all whatsoever, so we can save our shards for any of the upcoming events. And speaking of shards and upcoming events, I want to highlight here that I do in fact have 63 Sacreds on my account. Obviously, we're not going to be pulling any for the Champion Chase. Stay tuned for that video once again later today. But there is the aspect of the 2 summon rushes. Now, because this Champion Chase is ridiculously easy, relatively speaking, it makes things a lot more interesting when it comes to the 2 summon rushes. My guess for the first normal summon rush is that it's going to be around 3,000 points, maybe 3,500 worst case, so 6 to 7 Sacreds in order to get yourself the 25 fragments being offered in that event. But then you also have the bonus summon rush, which I would guess would be somewhere somewhere around like a 2600 for the first half, and then maybe 4500-ish for the second half. So again, up to 9 sacreds to get to 50 fragments. So you could argue that doing the bonus summon rush would be better because you'd spend 2 to 3 more sacreds, but you'd also get to skip events. But you'd also be doing that midweek, so there may or may not be a progressive chance events going on at that time, and then you'd be missing the progressive chance over the weekend. And so it might be better to focus on all the events that you know you can do and then just do the first summon rush. So there's a little bit of strategy in there. I guess it would depend on how many sacreds you have to use, how many you want to save for Freya if you're going for that, and if you feel incentivized to skip some of the events and tournaments. So in this case, I'm playing it by ear, but my gut instinct is to always minimize the amount of shards I have to use. So for me, it would be participating in the first summon rush and just getting that one maxed out. So the 6 or 7-ish sacreds, depending on what the milestone is. And that would be just overall cheaper, even because I know I can do all the other events. So there you have it. That is my fusion plan for Thor Faehammer. Let me know in the comment section down below your thoughts on the champion overall. Do you think he's useless? Do you think he's useful? He is an attack-based nuker, which always can get a bad rap depending on the quality or lack of quality of their multipliers and their utility. But like I mentioned, I think he's a very powerful champion in the context of PvE specifically, but maybe there is some use cases in Arena as well. As always, if you did find this video helpful, then be sure to hit that like button down below. It really does help out the channel. And if you did enjoy the video, then be sure to subscribe to the channel for more content just like this one in the future. Thanks for watching and have a good one.